Another question that we get asked a lot when we say, our kids were at home, we schooled them at home and
Mm.
things like that. Are your kids weird? Because mine aren't. Uh, Hello and welcome to Center for Victory's podcast of Your Best Day Yet. At Center for Victory, we're here to help unlock, reinforce, and enrich relationships through personal and professional development. I'm Eric Guy, Chief Victory Officer here at the Center for Victory. With me today, our guest from Austin, Texas, Anita Anello. That's right. Yeah, I wanted to pronounce it the Spanish version of that. So I got that right. We're off to a good start, Anita. So listen, a little bit of background before we let Anita talk, because I'm looking forward to this, folks. Anita took the opportunity to retire from her career. I believe is it back in 2013. And you were a software executive to homeschool her kids, which we'll talk about that too, because some of you know that we had our kids at home too. So after 9 years, though, they're really feeling the squeeze financially. She began looking to go back to work, but she didn't want to get back into the tech industry. And so she started the Amazon business, not because it wasn't her thing. COVID hit, and then she discovered, without recognizing it, she had become an accomplished teacher and coach in various areas of life, which is cool. When she thought about it, she realized that she loved teaching and coaching, and that's where she come alive. Now, Anita runs a profitable online business helping other entrepreneurial-minded Christian women build businesses the same way she does, and she loves it. So welcome, Anita.
Oh, thank you, Eric. It's so good to be here today. We had a fun time just getting to know each other in the intro section. Love it.
Yeah. So very interesting. I'm going to try to keep us on track here. But first, I guess, you don't look very old. So, I mean, 2013 was, if my math is right, that's about 11 years ago. You decided to retire. I said a little bit about it, but what was the push to retire again?
So there was a couple of things that were going on. First and foremost, just so the audience understands, I had a great career. I loved what I did for so many years. It was so fulfilling. It was right in line with my skill set, my talents. I mean, I was thriving in a lot of ways. It's especially from the outside. I had the money and the title and the accolades, and felt like I climbed this corporate ladder and had all the things that went with it. And I distinctly remember Eric getting to a spot and feeling kind of like choked out and almost looking around thinking, is this it? Like, this can't be it, because inside I wasn't happy. And it didn't have anything to do with anything externally. It was a whole bunch of stuff that was going on internally. By that time, we had our two youngest kids. This life had shifted a lot of ways. We had already been homeschooling for many years, but my heart's desire was to be at home with them full time. And so much so, I used to be sitting on conference calls, much like what we're doing here today, except minus all the Zoom and the Teams meeting and all that kind of stuff. And I would put myself on mute because I'd hear my kids outside playing with my nanny. They were totally well taken care of, absolutely loved, having a blast, but I would put myself on mute because I would be crying. And my heart would be breaking, thinking, I want to be out there with my kids. And which is, I mean, let's just kind of put another layer to that. We already homeschooled our kids. We already had in-home care. Like, we were already around our kids a lot. And for me as a mom, like, my heart was just breaking. And then it was also coming to an intersection in my career where it just wasn't super satisfying anymore. And I thought, what's going on? Like, this can't be it. I can't have done all these things and have all this success, but be so incredibly unhappy inside. And I'll put it in this context, and I'll say to your listeners, wherever they're coming from, just be where you're at. My context is the framework of, this is kind of like a desire that God had put in my heart to be with my kids full time as like that next step. And so that's what we did. I had an opportunity to retire early. I retired pretty young. And there were a couple components to that. One is my husband and I had talked about that a lot. Two, it was about an 8-year process going through the motions of feeling this angst. And so it wasn't immediate. Three, another part that's super important to the story is we had a financial plan, and we had a plan
Mm-hmm.
to be able to go and make that step. So I wouldn't ever recommend anybody, especially folks in the Christian community. Sometimes you hear like, well, this is just where God called me, and then I'm going to figure out along the way. There's not necessarily anything quote unquote wrong with that, except for the fact it just adds a whole lot of tension to your life and to the marriage if the financial component is not talked about or taken care of. So that was one of those things that was super important to me, that we had the finance part squared away. And so let me kind of pause right there, because that's a lot already.
Yeah, thank you for that, and I appreciate the context there, because people really need to understand that you did have a plan going in. So I appreciate that immensely. But I'm gonna jump to another question that we get asked a lot, when we say, our kids were at home, we schooled them at home, and things like that. Are your kids weird? Because mine aren't. But that's always the first question that comes out. You got weird kids.
So where I hear that question, but in a different way. We get
Okay.
we always got asked a whole lot. What about socialization?
Right.
And I'm like, okay, let's talk about this again.
Yes.
The other thing is, we joke as a family, like, yes, there are weird homeschooling families. Let's just be clear. By the way, there's also weird private school families and mainstream families. There's weird families and weird socialization issues and topics. I actually don't believe that socialization as a topic in the homeschooling community has anything to do with academics. I believe it's a family topic, not even an issue. It's just, if you're more socialized, because my kids were raised in Southern California. We did move to Austin about 5 years ago, but in SoCal, where you're around, right? We're around a thriving community with a healthy neighborhood. We have a healthy church family, a healthy homeschooling community. Like, we have all these groups around us that we're doing all these things with. So socialization wasn't really a topic for us. Plus, my husband, he's a Jersey Italian guy and gets along with absolutely everybody. Like, he's the kind of guy that, Eric, you and him would be best friends in about 2 seconds flat, because unless you had like a baseball rivalry, I see the bat in the background. That might be a topic for you guys. But my husband's so social. And so I would always laugh. I'd be like, socialization, like, have you met my husband? Like, there's no way these kids aren't being unsocialized. And so there's a lot that's there. Yeah. And as far as like, are my kids weird or something like that? I mean, no more, no less than anybody else, I guess I would say. I mean, I don't think we are, but
Yeah. I just wanted to get that out
yeah,
there.
yeah, no, it's a thing. When you homeschool, you and I know it's a thing. People ask weird things like, what kind of manipulatives are you using for your kids when they're in grade school and they're learning how to spell? And I'm like, what? Okay. It's the thing. It's on the list of questions that people ask you when you homeschool.
Yeah, I just enjoyed that, because you obviously were talking about something that you love with your career now. I enjoyed that time, because most of the time I was working somewhat from home out in the community and all that. And I got to, I got to have lunch sometimes with them. That was a huge benefit, just to get to talk to them. We got to go to everything together. I mean, my son, he went on his first trip out of the country with me when he was 10. When he got to see, how we train people and what we do with folks. And he understood that. And my daughter was 10 when she took her first trip too. And I still have what she was doodling on her page. People thought she was coloring. She was actually taking notes from my lecture, and I still have them, framed. And we got to do some hiking when we were out in Utah and things like that. But, what did you appreciate the most, or have appreciated most, about being with your kids?
So I think there's a couple of pieces that for me. One, so we're like 15 years into homeschooling. So we're not brand new anymore. We're not done yet. Yeah. Right? We're not really technically in the middle, but we've had some time under our belts. I would say where I used to think it was a sacrifice to live on one income so that one parent could stay home, I would say it was a great honor. And reflecting back, all of us will say, so my husband and I and our kids will say, we're just really grateful for the time that we were able to invest in one another in the relationships. Because while the academics in our household, academics were super important, because I was like, hey, everybody's getting ready to go to college or whatever. Like, we're going to get prepared to do the things in life and be well-adjusted adults and all this kind of stuff. But you just use you. So the other part of it is there's a tremendous amount of like maturity and growth that happens not just in the kids, but also as a homeschooling parent. There's a lot of sanctification that happens as you're working through character issues all day long, right? And so I think for me, it was, I had this picture early on, even before we started schooling. So when I was, when our daughter was just born, I looked at my husband, and I have an older stepson. He was mainstream school all the way. And I remember looking at my husband saying, I think I have a heart to homeschool. What do you think about that? And he was like, I don't know. I don't even know what that means, you know? And so as we started going on this journey and figuring it out, like, it's the best decision as a family that we personally have ever made. Now, I will say that I'll add to that. I have had hundreds, multiple hundreds of moms and women come to me over the years and say, Anita, I wish I could have homeschooled my kids because of whatever. It's okay. Like, whatever, however you schooled your kids, however you intentionally raised your kids, however you decided to do these things that God's put on your heart, that, or it's just your heart's desire, like, it's all good. We can all operate in all these different arenas. Like, that's what I love about the freedom that we have in just our education system and our choices.
Yeah.
Right. Our choices in our businesses, our choices in our homeschooling, our choices in our household. I love the fact that we can, as husband and wife together, we can make choices that say, this is what I think the right thing to do is. And it's been so fruitful for us as a family. Our kids have always said, I mean, there's been times, let's be clear, that when it's like, this is hard, you know, or there's been times when I would say, like, this is crazy. I'm going back to work and everybody's going back to private school. I'm done, you know, but by and large, and that's just being transparent about the challenges of life and raising kids. But by and large, it's probably one of the single most best decisions that we made as a couple and as a family is to homeschool our kids. Yeah. And it's really because of the relationship. If you hear what's happening underneath all of that, it's all about the relationship.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm fortunate that I had my phone on Do Not Disturb as we're talking about kids, because my daughter just called while we were on, on the podcast, and she must have just got done with work. But yeah, it was good just to see them and watch all that growth too. But thanks for that little side note there. But I had to take that opportunity just to encourage people, whatever that choice is for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was so fulfilling for us and everything that we were able to do with our kids, and what that the doors that opened up with that. We were talking before we started the podcast of how neat it is to have a podcast or YouTube channel and just all these people that you meet. And I was telling you, the past year or so has really, really stretched that for us, of the people that I've gotten to talk to.
Yeah.
And that was the same way it was for our kids when we were doing that. I mean, we were going all over the state, meeting different kids, and literally, and Pennsylvania's big. So
it sure is.
They have friends all over the place. I'm like, who's that? Oh, Dad, I went to school with them. I'm like, I can't remember. Well, you took me to see him. Oh, okay, I got it.
Right. Yeah.
And just those experiences there, and what that, probably how that opened their minds up to everything as well. But
yeah. So one of the things that we did, we traveled a lot as well. I wanted to be able to do the academics at home and then get out and experience life. I wanted them to be able to experience that where we studied about something, but now let's actually go do something with that. And so it's interesting now, you see this trend in the universities that are coming back and wanting to recruit homeschooling students, because one of the things that's super common Not with everybody, not with the weird homeschooling families, right? Because that happens. Let me just be clear. Like every once in a while, you get something in the news. Somebody's like locked their kids in the closet and they have, their whatever, right? That stuff happens, right? It's not, it's out there. But the thing is, a lot of times when you homeschool your kids, you're schooling multiple grades at the same time. You're schooling with lots of they're getting exposed to not just their peer group of just the same 30 kids that are in second grade and the same thoughts and the same words and the same actions and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of times homeschooling kids are sought after in the workforce and in the academic arena because of the fact that they can be a little bit more broad and able to communicate with other people at different age groups and in different backgrounds. And they don't quite have like this narrow little mindset that says, no, I only know how to operate with those that are in my same grade and in my same classroom. But I do know how to actually go out and hang out with people that are lots of different ages and lots of different backgrounds and lots of different belief systems, because at least in our journey of homeschooling, that was part of it. We wanted to be able to expose them to lots of different environments, because how great is it that as kids, we can see, not everybody lives in like the bubble of Austin or the bubble of Orange County or the bubble of Pittsburgh. Like I wanted my kids to experience like the country looks different wherever you go. There's a socioeconomic difference where you go. Like there's all these pieces that are so unique to each area around the United States. And when you travel abroad, like I really wanted my kids to be exposed to that. And so we did that. We did that as part of the plan. And that it helped. It also helped to break up the monotony of just school over and over and over again. I mean, there's that, right? There's that element of it.
Yeah. And let's just remind everybody, you had a plan to retire, and that plan got kind of derailed a little bit. What impact did COVID have on that for your family, personally and professionally for you?
So let me just kind of give some context around the story. So I had been super successful in the corporate space, retired early, decided to come home and homeschool the kids for a little while. And then about maybe 6 years in or so this was about 5 years ago, I started getting kind of restless. Kids are getting older. The demands for me to do a lot of the school work and the teaching was getting lower. And I would look at my husband. I was like, we've done the field trips. The house is clean. Everybody's educated. I've done I've worked out, like I've done all the things, and I'm still like twiddling my thumbs. And I'm kind of a doer. Like I love adventure. I love to get out and do some things. And so my husband and I kind of started on a journey and started having conversations. And he was so sweet. He said the best thing ever to me. He would be like, I was like, well, what should I do? Should I do this or this or this? And he's like, I don't know, honey. Only you can answer that. Like those words were music to my ears. And then he would say, but I know you're going to figure it out. So I tried a couple of things. Some things worked, some things didn't. I landed in the Amazon world as a seller, and it was pretty good. You use your garage as like your storage space for your inventory and stuff like that. And we worked those pieces out. But the funny thing was, Eric, is that I consider myself to be pretty introverted, and not necessarily, whereas my husband's super extroverted. I didn't necessarily feel like I needed a ton of people in my life or in my career. Like we have a lot of friends and stuff like that, but I didn't necessarily feel like it was a big need. Okay. So then COVID hits, and then everybody's completely isolated, and the world's gone kind of wacky and all of that. And I thought, wow, this is weird. Like I never really realized how much I enjoyed interacting with people on a little bit more basis. So as I started to kind of pull back the layers and do a little bit of introspective work and a little bit of diving in deeper, I realized, wow, the inventory business alone without the people aspect is kind of not my thing. And there were some other things. It's super challenging to be an Amazon seller. It's amazing if you can get it right. And it's a really challenging business. But then COVID hit and the whole supply chain shut down around the world. Now I had a wholesale business for Amazon, and I only wholesaled products that were made in the US. However, with the supply chain shut down all around the world. And then the Amazon warehouses shut down all around the United States at one point. Then they had some big fires in some of the warehouses. I just kind of realized it was like all these pieces were coming together. The social aspect of feeling like, wow, I kind of miss working with teams and people and stuff like that. And then the COVID hitting and all this stuff. And I thought, I don't really think this is for me anymore. So it kind of started with an internal question, had more conversations with my husband, and then I went on another journey and started doing some more introspective work. And through that process, a lot of journaling, a lot of talking, getting some coaching, I realized, you know what? I've been coaching for like 20 or 30 years already, teaching, coaching, public speaking, like doing all the things. And that's kind of where my heart starts to sing. And so I started transitioning away from the Amazon business, and eventually a couple of years later shut that down, and then started transitioning into the coaching world and really finding that sweet spot of that successful corporate woman of faith who really wants to transition over and build her own business based on what I call her specialized skill set.
Okay. So, and that's what you're doing today.
Yeah.
Did you face any challenges when you decided to enter the workforce again and do this? I mean, even though it was something that you're very passionate about and you love it now, I mean, what were the challenges around that?
Oh, yes. One is having had spent time with the kids a whole, full time, kind of peeling away from that and being able to go out and do certain things was super challenging, both for them and for me, because there just was it was kind of like we were transitioning into a new season. So the family dynamics started to be a little bit different. The other thing is just reapplying my knowledge and my skill set in a new arena, and then learning the tools and kind of just cultivating a whole new network of people, but then the same network of people that I had known in my industry for a lot of years, and being able to figure those things out along the way was super challenging. Sometimes, sometimes even just, and I came from the tech space, sometimes even figuring out the new tech that had changed so much. I mean, I don't know, like running Facebook ads, like
Yeah.
those kinds of things where I was like, I know that I know how to do this. What is happening? So it was interesting that there were like some practical, tactical things. The other thing that was a big thing for me, Eric, was the mindset stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because so if you look at the bigger picture, I remember when I retired from tech, I got this picture, this vision in my mind that said, I knew that at some point when I went back to work, that I knew I was going to own my own business, because I had owned a business before and I loved that part of it. I didn't want to work 80 hours a week for somebody else. I knew that was a no, and 80 hours, 40 hours, that didn't matter to me. It was a definite no for me. I knew that I could make at least the same as what I made before. And I had a healthy 6+ figure income before. And I knew I could make at least that much. And I also knew that I could work about a half to a quarter of the time at what I did before in my full-time job. I knew those things in me, but walking those out was challenging, because it was kind of like, I know I can do this, but it's just like an exercise, right? You kind of stretch it. And then going fast forward into just this last year and a half or so of making 3 times what I used to make and working a quarter of what I used to make. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's totally possible. And yet,
Yeah.
so for me, there's also, and I think for everybody, there's a lot of inner work that gets done in your head and your heart. The other part of that is when you transition from, I'm an employee over here, and I believe that, these are the things I believed. So I'm not putting it on anybody else. This is just was my mindset. I believe that security happened with one employer over a long period of time. And then I've actually come to shift that belief system to believe more like, actually, that's a riskier thing, because what happens if that business goes through a layoff or something like that? And so shifting and realizing, oh, I actually have more security when I can serve more clients and do the things that I really love, and hire some people to do the things that I'm not super crazy about. And there's more freedom over in the entrepreneurial space. So the mindset of going from an employee to an entrepreneur, it's a journey. For some, it happens a little bit faster than others. I know for me, which I think the funny thing is for me is I had already been an entrepreneur. I'd already owned a business, even though I worked in the corporate space too. Like I had already done these things, but somehow I felt like it was different. There were some different circumstances and stuff like that, but just working through the head and the heart topics of like, wow, I can do this, and then finding my group, finding my people along the way, because really when you are an entrepreneur, you do think differently and you do have different conversations than your friends that are employees. And there's nothing wrong with either one of those. It's just a different mindset that if you're going to go forward as an entrepreneur, when you're ready to do that, you need to look at things differently. You need to shift your perspective a little bit. I call it like, it's just a tiniest little like chiropractic shift. You go to a chiropractor and it's like just that tiny little thing, but it totally changes the trajectory of where you're going. That just little bit of a degree off, but eventually the path that you end up on is so different than if you had stayed the same. And so I needed to get around other people that could encourage me, that could see those, like that gold inside of me and help draw it out and help me map out a plan to be able to get there. I'm a huge planner. I mean, I love a good plan.
Well, you talked about, having people around, and that's one of the things that you've actually created now.
Yeah.
Through your passion and love for coaching and teaching is the entrepreneurial minded Christian women's group. What how do you structure that? What are you doing in that group? I mean, these are people that explain that for us, because I think it's really important too, but I just want to reemphasize it for the people that are listening and watching.
Sure. So it's there's a couple of things that happen. It's an application only group, and that's real prescriptively, both because I want to make sure it's a good fit for somebody who's coming into our community, and I want to make sure we're a good fit for them, because let's just be clear, we're not all a good fit for one another, and that's totally okay. And also we want to be able to cultivate a environment where women can genuinely be cheerleaders for one another and champions for one another. Can we just say, like in the corporate space, or sometimes women, we're not always the best cheerleaders of each other. We have a tendency to believe that, we compare one another, we tear each other down. We think that there's always this competition. I'm not saying men don't do this as well. I just serve women. So I know how women operate. And so there's none of that allowed. And so that's part of the process, is being able to determine, like, are you a good fit in the sense of like, you already know how to be successful. You probably have more time for more money than you do have time. You know how to run teams, you know how to be a leader, you know how to do these things. Like you know what you're good at. That's another thing, is being able to take what I call that specialized knowledge and transition it over to the entrepreneurial space, and then watch your revenue really take off. Somebody who, like a woman who comes to me and says, I don't know, Anita, I'm good at like hundreds of things. Well, that's awesome. So either we're going to do one of two things. Either we're going to figure out what your 1 to 3 things are, and we're going to start there, or we're probably not a good fit. Cause I just, right. If you tell me, I don't know what I'm good at, like, I don't know what to do that personally. Right. We have to be able to have the foundation to have a conversation to go forward. So those are some of the components. We meet on a regular basis. We hold each other accountable, because don't we know, when we've come from an employee environment where maybe you have a boss telling you, these are your KPIs, these are the goals, these are what we're going to do for the next 6 to 12 to 18 months. And then you try to transition over to an entrepreneurial, and let's say you're doing it solo. There's kind of like this sense of like, I'm a little bit overwhelmed. So you need some help and support along the way about what's the right next step of integrity to take. But also we can get so full of all these ideas that if we're not investing in ourselves with a coach to have somebody hold us accountable, then we can kind of flounder around, and we don't want to do that, right? We want to be able to move forward in the desires that we have to go after the things that we know that are like our next step. And so those are some of the characteristics of the ladies that are a good fit for us and our community. So it's just kind of starting to scratch the surface.
Wonderful. Because as we, this has been a great conversation and love to have you back and chat more. But
Mhm.
as we wrap up today, what are like what are your top 2 or 3 tips, especially around the group that you serve, that you could leave them with today?
I love this question. This is one of my all-time favorites. The first one is don't be overwhelmed, because you already know inside of you what you're really, really, really good at and where your heart sings. And if you feel like you don't know, just start writing it out. So take a couple of minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever, journal out. And I would genuinely say, write it all down. Write what your perfect day looks like from the time you get up to the time you go to bed, who you're waking up next to, where you're waking up, what you're doing for work, where you're going for lunch, all of it. And the only rule on that is there's no rules. There's no boundaries. There's no rules. You just write it all down for yourself, and then just let it sit and kind of meditate on it. If you need to let it sit on the shelf for a day or a week or whatever, then go back. And then the follow-up is double check and see how much of those pieces you're already doing in your life. Okay. So that'd be one, is figure out what you want to do. Then the next one is really just try not to get overwhelmed and just take the next right step of integrity. And that can be different, right? I know, Eric, you and I see this a lot, is that there's a lot of amazing information out on the internet for free and all this great stuff. Like, we all do that, but we have a tendency to kind of over consume, and then
Mm-hmm.
we get overwhelmed, and then we don't do anything at all. And so what I'm saying is, don't do that. Just take the next one right step of integrity, whatever you know that to be. Then frameworks are great, all that kind of stuff, but you got to do it in the context of what makes sense for your life. So not every framework, just like not every coach, is going
Mm-hmm.
to work for you. So I guess that would be, maybe I'll throw in a third thing, is listen for the people that you should be listening to, because you shouldn't be listening to everybody out there. And it's
Absolutely.
not that anything's wrong with anybody. I mean, there are, but we won't get into that. It's more of a matter of, when somebody tells a story that resonates with you, that speaks to your heart, know that that might be a person that it's time to walk shoulder to shoulder with, and maybe invest in a little bit more. So be willing to invest in yourself, um, to take those next steps forward, because that goes back to, there's a lot of free information out there, but don't just be like a free junkie. Just,
Yeah.
invest in yourself to take that next step forward.
Good advice. Before we forget, I know your website is the rippleeffect.net. How do else do people get in touch with you? Is that the best way?
Yeah, you can Google Anita Anello, and you'll find me all over social and everything like that. I do have a free masterclass that's coming up on April 2nd, that I'll make sure that Eric and his team have a link. If you want to be able to join us, we're just talking about the secrets that it takes to be able to take that next step to build the business of your dreams based on your unique skill set. And so we'll have more information up at the rippleeffect.net. And then also you can go to Anita and Ello. So either one of those works.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for hanging out today. Really appreciate all this great advice. It was an absolute blast. But that's all for today, folks. Thanks for watching and listening. Make sure you hit the like, subscribe, and share buttons there. And you can visit us at centerforvictory.com. And just remember, wherever you're at, whatever you're doing, make this your best day yet. We'll see you later.